Hello, everyone. Welcome to Short Film Saturdays. We're really excited today because we have an award-winning filmmaker, Academy Award shortlisted filmmaker with us today. And we have two films from Sudan to show, and we're just really excited. So welcome, everybody. Again, we're excited to see all of the usual comments and chats coming up during these two films. We know it's going to spur a lot of conversation. For those of you who are new to Short Film Saturdays, I am Mika 𝗤𝗧𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦𝗧𝗧. I'm the founder and CEO of Soleil Space. And if you're not familiar with Soleil, we're a media company, Brooklyn-born, and our mission is to achieve a more equitable and representative global film and TV landscape. Our focus is on the global diasporas of Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East, with the goals of elevating untold stories from these cultures and creators from these cultures, and form closer community bonds and providing opportunities and resources for these creators to produce premium world-class content. We specialize in film, TV, and editorial media, and aim to lift up these voices from these regions that we feel aren't often seen, authentically represented, or understood in the global mainstream. So there's no better way to do that than short films. Shorts are often a purest form of an artist's expression, especially because often they're not executed within the boundaries, within big production budgets, right? Usually it's small production budgets. Usually it's the first few films that a filmmaker makes, so it's very pure, very raw, and we just love short films. So since launching Short Film Saturdays, we have featured 65 films from 53 filmmakers in 25 countries around the world. So we're really proud of that. And today is another first. This is our first Sudanese filmmaker that we're featuring today. So we're really excited. We also are bringing today's Short Film Saturdays to you with a partner, Moving Image Middle East. And 𝗦𝗡 is a website and newsletter which focuses on the moving image culture in all its forms and is a one-stop destination for film, TV, and all artistic development in Middle Eastern countries. A little trade news, a touch of celebrity, all with a very sophisticated and healthy dose of culture that's really curated with lifestyle, fashion, and reviews. So go to 𝗦𝗡.news to check them out. If you like what you see today and you want to learn more about Middle Eastern film, that's the place to go. So thank you, 𝗦𝗡, our partner for today. So let me introduce this filmmaker. The lovely Suzannah Mirghani is a writer, researcher, and independent filmmaker. She's a media studies and museum studies graduate. Mixed race Sudanese and Russian, she is interested in stories about the complexity of identity. Suzannah is the writer, director, and producer of 𝗔𝗟-𝗦𝗧𝗢, which you'll see today. And 𝗔𝗟-𝗦𝗧𝗢 won the Canal+Award at Clermont-Ferrand Short Film Festival in 2021, as well as 6 Academy Award qualifying prizes at Tampere Film Festival. So you guys are going to see a really amazing film. It also won awards at LA Shorts, Bronze Lens, and the New Orleans Film Festival, AFI Fest, and Interfilm Berlin. Suzannah's latest short is the experimental documentary social media satire called 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗪, which she did in 2021 and premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. And she's now working on her first feature, 𝗤𝗔𝗥𝗥𝗦, a magical realist tale set in the cotton fields of Sudan. Oh, I see a connection there, Suzannah, with the cotton fields, but I wouldn't spoil it for the audience. So Suzannah, welcome. I'll give you a little bit to just, say hi to the audience and a brief introduction of the film. No spoilers, just a quick introduction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Soleil and 𝗦𝗡. This is such a wonderful platform, and I too love short films. This is where I started, and this is where I plan to go back to after the feature. So thank you very much for screening it today. And I look forward to talking with the audience after the screening.
Yes. All right. Thank you. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, the way this works is you will now see the two films, one after the other. We'll screen them. And then we'll be back here for Q&A live with Suzannah, the director, and the audience. And at the end, you'll be able to ask questions about the film, put your comments in the chat. So it's a lot of fun. So stay tuned for the Q&A after the show and enjoy the films. All right, so we're back. And this audience is lit. I feel like I say this every week, but I think the audience gets more lit every week. And Suzannah, like, you brought the energy with these films and they responded.
Oh my God.
Yes.
The audience are fantastic. Best audience ever. I was just following the chats. They're hilarious.
No, this is really awesome. So this is a Q&A that we're about to start, guys. So we're going to hopefully get all of your questions answered and touch on all of the great comments we saw. For those of you who are just joining, this is Short Film Saturdays with Soleil Space and Moving Image Middle East. And you just saw two films from Suzannah Mirghani, a Sudanese-Russian filmmaker, director. And we just saw two of her films, 𝗔𝗟-𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦, a six-time Academy Award qualifying film, as well as Caravan, which was one of her first short films. Was it your very first short film or one of your first?
No, it was one of them, but I think you can tell which one of these two films had a budget and which didn't.
Yeah, well, maybe they can't tell, actually. So, Suzannah, let's go. All right, we'll start with 𝗔𝗟-𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦, which is the first film that you guys saw. And well, as you see, Suzannah, this Short Film Saturday audience is global. I think I saw people from Indonesia joining. First time I think I realized that there were people from Indonesia tuning in, India, all over the world, right? So everyone is coming from very different backgrounds. And for those who might not be familiar, could you please explain the tradition of marrying off a daughter, particularly as it occurs in this context of rural Sudan?
Yes, arranged marriages are not unique to our part of the world. They happen all over the world, you know, even probably where you live in the West as well. It's like not arranged in that way, but you know, the families always want the best for their daughter, and there's different degrees of arranging, right? So some people would maybe force people into it, other people would ask permission, and then sometimes it's just expected. Sometimes it's just part of the culture that it's not even considered to be a bad thing. So what I highlight in this film is that everyone has their own personal motivations for either wanting the marriage to happen or not wanting the marriage to happen. And nobody is thinking about the young girl. And I think that's the tragedy. So the parents do want the best for her. You know, here's this handsome, young, rich man. Like, what is your problem? Like, why would you not want this? But, you know, love is something that you cannot explain, you know, rationally. So arranged marriages happen in our part of the world or in Sudan as a cultural, as within the cultural environment, and it's not considered a bad thing. And I just wanted to highlight the young girl's feelings.
Yeah, but it was really interesting how you and we'll talk about this, but how you were able to highlight her feelings, but at the same time, highlight her lack, that she was not the protagonist in the conversation. She didn't even speak, right, for the entire film, but we'll talk about that. So kind of touching on the clash then between, because a lot of times when arranged marriages are portrayed to Western audiences, is portrayed as something very either ancient or oppressive. And I'm glad that you talked about, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing and there are different degrees of it, right? But there's that clash between traditional and newer ideas as presented early on in the film, particularly through Nadir himself, because it's clear that he looks at life and the whole method of rural cotton picking, well, as a few things, right? Like he sees it as a business opportunity. He sees it as kind of an ancient thing that he's like this, you know, this modern kind of savior even. And so is that kind of what your intention was in terms of that character and bringing that clash to life?
For sure. I mean, there's no denying that Nadir, the young businessman, is an unctuous character, right? Even though he hasn't said anything bad, you know, he mistakes her for the maid when she comes in with the juice, but that's an honest mistake because, you know, where he lives, he's served. So these kind of things, he is a person of privilege. And so his privilege is written all over his character. And he comes here with this kind of what we assume to be a disingenuous reason, right? But he says, I'm here to help my people. You know, we don't know the truth of that or not, but we suspect that he's not here to help his people. But development takes very many forms. You know, when someone comes to develop, when someone comes to help others, it's also about themselves, right? It's not necessarily about the community. It's also about feeding their own egos as well. So I think everyone in this film can be taken with a pinch of salt. You know, every time I read in the chat, someone was like, "Oh, damn, I was with Granny up until this point."
Right.
Yeah, because Granny was protecting Nafisa up until the point that we find out that she's actually also dominating her and wants her to be a person that she chooses. So it's about control, you know, it's about control, and it's about who's in control in this situation.
And Granny also, I think you gave a hint to it early when she said, what would I do without you, right? So it was almost like a bit of she felt like she owned her and she needed her and she didn't want to let her go, which in introduction it was love, but then we saw that it was more about control, right?
Yes, and that's every family. That's every single family. Parents, the way that they love their children, and then the way that they also control their children. It's a very fine line. The line between love, care, and domination. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. And so, okay, we were a little obsessed with Nadir, but because I guess a big piece of curiosity was, do you feel like that attitude of, you know, the traditions being ancient and also those who come back, right, from, you know, living in the big cities or the West, etc., is that a common outlook that's shown by young Sudanese people today, would you say?
You know, different kinds of people, you know, they're different motivations. Some people go abroad, they experience a type of life that they don't see as aligning with their values. So even though they have a very modern lifestyle, they will come back to Sudan and try to prove that they're even more traditional. You know, sometimes they would want to have like a very traditional existence only to maybe fit in better. I don't know, but people have different ways of dealing with that, you know, living abroad and then coming back home.
Yes, that dynamic is I've experienced that. That's a really interesting dynamic. But I think it's probably even more interesting when there's such a big gap between, you know, where you went and where you came from. But let's kind of switch now to the feminism conversation. So a major part of 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦 is repressed female desire. We see clearly that Nafisa has someone she wants. It's not clear if that's what she wants or if what she's curious about, but she's never able to really express anything verbally. So, you know, Nadir mentions women being able to choose in the modern age, but we are seeing that in present days. Are we seeing that in present day Sudan, where, you know, when it comes to marriage and basic wants and opinions, are Sudanese women being heard, would you say?
There are many different types of Sudanese women, so I'd like to say that there is a particular Sudanese woman. It depends on class, it depends on your relationship with your family. It really depends on how supportive the father figure is of you, you know, because the patriarch is someone who can say yes or no very easily. So some people, if they have the support of their father, including that young actor in this film, that young actress in this film, she had the full support of her father and he came on set. He's actually in the film, he's the driver. And with that support, you have kind of a more free road ahead of you, and you can do things that you want to do, including acting. But yeah, so it depends. I never like to say the Sudanese woman is this, that, or the other, because I think class education has a lot to do with personal freedoms as well.
Okay, okay. And thank you so much for that, because it's rejecting stereotypes, right? That's how stereotypes are formed, right? When there's one kind of single assumption about a group of people and it just doesn't recognize the differences and nuances, right? So that's really great. And, you know, generationally now, we see that divide between 𝗪𝗓𝗓, who's, I don't know if 𝗪𝗓𝗓 is a traditionalist or a modernist, actually, in some ways, because at some points in the conversation, the parents seemed a little more traditional. I don't know. I'm curious to get your take on that.
I'm curious about 𝗪𝗓𝗓 as well. I really am. Like, for me, is such a fascinating and complex character that I don't understand her, to be honest. Like, sometimes I just feel that she kind of she channels all these ancestral beings, and I don't understand what the reasons are necessarily. They are about control. They're modern insofar as she is what I like to call a feminist, but someone who does it within a confined culture, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to find freedom for you, but I'm going to do it traditionally. So it's like, it's not black or white. It's not one or the other. You're not modern or traditional. It's just, how do we live the best lives we can within this culture?
And she herself was the empowered woman, right? And she talked about like her own liberation, and when her arranged marriage, that husband died, and all of that. So yeah, you did a great job with her. And well, this wasn't scripted, but I know people will be wondering, because some of them may not have seen it before. Are those tribal marks on 𝗪𝗓𝗓's face? Could you like give us a little bit about that?
Yes, so older women, they don't do it anymore. Actually, I don't think I have seen anybody under a certain age. So they're actually tribal scarrings, and they'll have different kinds. So this is a very common, the 3 on either side is very common of women of that age. My grandmother had it. And then you'll have different kinds. Some men will have it too. Some men will have it too, of that age.
Okay, and what tribe is it specifically?
So we are from the north. So we are 𝗔𝗟-𝗦𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦𝗦 and 𝗪𝗦𝗦. So we're actually from the Shimalia area of Sudan.
Oh my gosh, this is, I could offline, I'll just ask you more questions about this. This is so fascinating. Okay, let's switch gears. About Caravan now. That's the second film that we saw. Very, very different, right? So what inspired you to make this film? You said it was one of your earliest films, so I'm guessing there was a very raw intention and personal intention behind that. So tell us about the inspiration for this one.
So I think the 2 films are very, very different because they are also made for and about 2 very, very different countries. So 𝗪𝗓𝗓 is my love letter to Sudan, which is the country that I grew up in. I was a child and a teenager in Sudan. And so for me, that was a return. I returned to Sudan to make that film. I currently live in Qatar. And my family moved here when I was a teenager. So I've been living in Qatar all these years, and Qatar is like, I don't know how much you know about it, but 80% of the country is foreign, basically, foreign workers here. And so what you see in 𝗪𝗓𝗓 is a small kind of unified community, and one outsider comes. You know, Nadir is considered the one outsider, even though his ancestors were from that village. But what you see in Caravan is this big mix of languages and cultures and people and colors and attitudes and all of this kind of stuff. And that is what represents Doha, what represents Qatar. Just this kind of lyricism of thoughts. Everyone's just like, it's like Babel.
It actually, yes, that's a really good description of it. When you hear all these different languages, but the transitions were really cool, of how, like, you know, the guy handing over the pizza, and you know, so it showed like that there's connection still, even with disparate strangers. But, you
Yes.
know, the name of the film, I think, is interesting. And, you know, for those who may not be familiar, one of the definitions of a caravan is a group of people traveling together, especially now you put it in like, you know, the African or Asian context. We have a certain image of a caravan in our heads, right? People like going across a desert, right? On camels, like in order. So this is a very modern film, right? But you use the title Caravan. So why was that the choice?
Well, we live in a desert society, so Doha is in a desert society, and the heritage, the tradition is the traditional caravans with the camels and so on. And so this is just this is like the same but different, right? So this is just a modern take on that, where it's still a movement, it's still a travel, and it's still full of different nationalities. So like caravans would have taken pilgrims to Mecca and back, for example. So it would have been a caravan would have been filled with different languages and nationalities. So this is just a modern take on that. And I like the fact that the traffic jam also symbolizes kind of that moment in time, kind of that phasing a moment in time where you have a temporary society. So Doha, even though I've lived here for most of my life, a lot of the people, most of the people that live in Qatar are temporary migrants. So they would come for contracts, for work contracts, and go back, usually 2 to 3 years. I've been here since ages.
Don't date yourself. We won't do that. Okay. And, you know, I'm glad you said that because actually it was the last Mime collaboration screening. We screened a film that was set in Qatar. The Voices of the 𝗔𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗡𝗙.
Oh, I thought it was Don't Get Too Comfortable. Yes, Shaima.
Shaima's film, yeah. And she showed the change happening in the city, right? And you showed the different like people, transient people, right, in that lived in that city. So it sounds really dynamic. Like now I really want to visit there after hearing both
I'm
of you guys
actually
talk
in
about
Shaima's film. My voice is in Shaima's film.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Is it okay? Okay, I'll go back and we'll check that one off.
But it's a theme. It's a theme for us because this is one of the most multicultural countries I've ever lived in my life. In my classroom here, it was, I don't know, 10 different nationalities all at the same time. And that was very, very common. So for us, it's a theme. Like multiculturalism is a theme for us. Okay,
awesome. And so just getting a little more specific now on the actual physical production. Was that like you actually, you know, creating traffic with cars and all of that? I'm guessing you didn't. Like, what's the location and how did you, how did you go about that?
So for this film, for Caravan, I had zero budget. I think you can tell when you put the two films side by side, I really had zero budget. I made it in a Doha Film Institute workshop. So this was like a workshop film. It was what we had to produce in the end. And most of the people in the cars are workshop participants. So these would have been people, my colleagues in class every day. And we just asked them to bring their cars, and we found a little unused road that had a construction all around it, and we made this. And it was really just it was a fun exercise. And I like what you said at the beginning of this this whole evening, which is sometimes if you don't have a budget and you have a short film, it's a purer form of cinema. And I truly believe that, because that for me really spelt a lot about representing the country and the cultures in which you live.
Mm-hmm. Well, I come from a very multicultural society as well. Trinidad, it has a lot races,
sure.
Religions, different people who came at different times. So I could definitely relate to that. And one last thing on Caravan. So the film ends with a poem, The Emptiness, by 𝗤𝗔𝗥𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗥𝗦. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. What is the significance of ending the film with this poem, and how does it relate?
So this film turns into kind of a mystery towards the end. So it starts off with a woman reciting her shopping list, you know, the milk and the bread and everything just turns a little bit surreal towards the end. And then you see the two representatives of the local community. So then you see like the two Qatari, the older Qatari men towards the end, and then the sea. Like the sea is very important for the history of Qatar. This was a fishing town and a pearling town. Like pearls and pearl diving was the economy, the entire economy in the 20s and 30s. And then that economy got completely destroyed in the 30s when they discovered cultured pearling in Japan. So you can imagine like all these connections, and one person's invention in Japan can destroy an entire economy in another part of the world. But then they found oil, so don't feel too sad.
No, I mean, I don't feel sad. It's something that like you would never know. Like
yeah.
you never.
Yeah, so these are the sea is really important, and I kind of wanted to just leave it on that kind of mysterious note. So now we find out that the traffic jam has actually happened because a person has abandoned their car. They have abandoned their car, and where have they gone? So they have presumably gone into the sea.
Wow, that is awesome. Great stuff. Okay, well, while we're asking Suzannah just a couple more questions, I'm going to open it up for audience questions. Let me check the chat. You guys are still going. So if you had questions before, right? Because the chat is so busy today, please put your questions again so they come bottom of the feed in this case on the YouTube chat. So please repeat your questions if you've asked them before and you want us to pose them to Suzannah so that they're visible. And while they do that, I'm going to ask you a couple more things. So, you know, what would you say is the connective tissue throughout your work? And I think with these two films, we see two very different sides of you. We discovered so many different layers to you, which is really fascinating. What would you say connects your work, or even how it's evolved, right? Based on your experiences.
Honestly, I get told off sometimes by mentors for not having a single voice, you know. So I really enjoy just exploring different types of art and different types of filmmaking. I have a lot of experimental work. 𝗔𝗥𝗥𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥 is kind of a very traditional film that kind of goes off on its own towards the end. I would say if I was to answer your question, I would say some kind of magical realist element. There has to be something out of the ordinary. So even if it starts off ordinary, it does not end ordinary. I think that is the connective thread. I don't know, but I'd have to go back and watch my old films. But I do like to experiment.
Well, word of advice, you know, mentors are great, but that piece of advice, don't listen to, because
no, I don't. I know, that's why I have a social media satire right now called Virtual Voice. You know, I literally made it on my phone. I told you earlier that I'm not a social media person, but I did make a film on my phone.
No, but it's great. Like, I think this is really, really good, because a lot of filmmakers are told to pigeonhole themselves, right? And I think it's because of the Western structures and systems, quite frankly. It's like, you need to sell yourself as this. You need to do a few horror films for people to have confidence that you're a horror filmmaker, genre film, you know, and like, particularly when you put it in the context of, you know, filmmakers from different cultures spanning different identities, like it's just not, that doesn't fit.
I think what they say is your voice. Find your voice. And I'm like, but I come from different cultures. I have multiple voices. I speak different languages. It's like I cannot have one voice, and I will not have one voice.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, and then the next phase is kind of speaking to those different cultures. Being mixed race, Sudanese and Russian. I've never met anybody who's both Sudanese and Russian.
There's thousands of us.
Yeah, so how does these two cultures, how do they influence you? And how do they influence your work as well?
That's also interesting. I think it makes you doubt and suspicious of purity of identity and purity of ethnicity. You realize very quickly that there's no such thing, and anyone who's claiming to be is just a fool. So it's like they're fooling themselves. So I think nationality, patriotism, these kind of things never meant anything to us. We always saw through it immediately. So I think just being open to hybridity, to variety, it was always our motto. Me and my sisters growing up, and I presume people who share my hybrid cultural background. And
you said there are thousands of people with that. Yes. So is there like some political history to that?
Yes. I'm a child of politics. So we all are. So Russian Sudanese are purely children of politics because the USSR government invited African and Arab and South American students to Russia to study for free. So my father went to Russia to study medicine, not speaking a word of Russian, but it was, a free education, and come back with a Russian wife. And so we have a community of Russian Sudanese in Russia and a community of Russian Sudanese in Sudan.
Wow.
And you will find Palestinian Russian, you will find Venezuelan Russian, you will find Kenyan Russian.
Wow,
it's very common for me.
Okay, no, this is like, I'm just learning so much and soaking so much, like the wheels are turning a lot. We'll keep talking for sure after this, but let me give the audience a chance. So we have a few questions coming in. All right. In our seat, our grandma's magic powers real?
Well, I think the doubt is enough. I think the not knowing is a power.
Very interesting. Is it, I'm gonna prove, is there a myth or even a belief that these women from that generation in that tribal, community do have magical powers?
Not necessarily, no, not as a cultural trope, but 𝗔𝗟 herself, now in the feature that I'm writing, my feature is Cotton Queen, and it's a fully realized version of 𝗔𝗟. So 𝗔𝗟 is one small incident, which is the arranged marriage. So now I'm writing the feature, and in the feature, she is kind of the herbal healer, the seer, the knower, these extra elements, extra human elements that aren't, all kind of wizardry and that kind of power, but just small things, small knowings.
Okay. Wow, that's great. And then there's a question for Caravan now. Which came first, the poem or the short film idea?
It was the film itself. It was the film itself, but it all kind of worked because it was an experimental writing process. It wasn't written all in one go. So there was a little bit of writing, there was the poem, there was more writing. So it was kind of all overlapping. So it was not one or the other.
Okay. And I'll take one more question because they keep coming. Yeah, they keep coming. Okay, I'll take two more. I'll take one long one short one. Okay, this one we could combine. What films inspire your work? So someone also asked, who is your favorite filmmaker? So you could probably answer both together.
Sure. I have a very eclectic sense of cinema. I love lots of different things. Some things I love recently. So 𝗪𝗦𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪 is becoming one of my very, very all-time favorites. She's an Italian filmmaker. She made a film called 𝗤𝗕𝗦𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗪 that is now up there with one of my all-time favorites. And I'm also a huge fan of 1940s Hollywood.
Oh, interesting.
So I have a broad range of interests.
which is consistent. That makes sense. And then the last question, I'm sorry, guys, I have to make this the last question. And I know it's my fault because I had so many follow-up questions for Suzannah. But you may have answered this already, but can you go more into the grandmother saying that the woman doesn't have the right to choose for marriage, or was it just the case to protect her child?
I think it's deliberately vague. At the time, you think that it is protection, and then later you find out that it's domination, but then later you find out it's protection again. So I always try to be inconsistent with a person's character, because a person is never consistent, right? So she has multiple motivations for why she doesn't want her grandchild to marry this man. She doesn't want to be alone. She wants to protect her. She wants to make sure that she knows she's unhappy in this situation. So there are multiple factors.
Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for your questions.
Thank you for your comments in the chat. I love them. They were Deep Sleep and Caroline and Girly and all of you. I think my chat's gone, but I thought you guys were hilarious. So while you were watching the film, I was watching your chats. And yes, the fly knows. Who said that? Cater it. The fly knows.
I love that. No, it's like, and every week you think like, oh, well, you just get like so many different reactions. And, that's something that filmmakers talk about Short Film Saturdays, is like also the people coming from different places, where you hear questions from people from different parts of the world, or who are encountering the culture at the same time. I think that's one of the favorites for me in seeing those comments. So thank you guys so much again, as always. And so to end, what's next for you? Which project should we be looking forward to? You talked about the feature film for 𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧. Anything else you want to mention?
My social media satire, Virtual Voice, is I love it. I think it's hilarious. I literally made it on my phone. But if you find it anywhere, I think it might be online somewhere at the moment. But otherwise, Cotton Queen, which is my first feature, which is taking a very long time. I love short films.
And where can they find the social satire? Do you have the
Virtual
website?
Voice is doing various festivals at the moment. I post about it on my social media, and festivals now do a hybrid thing. So even though after Corona they're screening it physically, they also have it on their websites quite a lot. So if you search my name on Virtual Voice, you'll probably see where it's screening. Okay.
And where can people just keep up with you in general? Social, you said you're not often on social media, but still give the handles. Is there a website?
My social media manager is my 13-year-old niece. So it's at Suzannah Mirghani, all one word, on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, awesome. Well, Suzannah, you are fascinating. Thank you so much for opening so many of your worlds to us today. This was really great. And it's just really rewarding, because if you can't hear, I feel like we get an injustice done when we can't hear filmmakers, and especially short filmmakers, because even in festivals, a lot of times the short films are kind of tacked on to the feature, and it's the feature director that gets the Q&A, right? And that's something that we wanted to solve with this program too. And, again,
amazing. Really amazing. I love this platform. Thank you, Soleil Space and Mime. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and really, I appreciate it very much.
Yes, and thank you, Nina. Thank you so much for bringing Suzannah to us and the Mime family. So I'm going to close now. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Short Film Saturdays. If you want to keep up with all things Soleil Space, from our partners like Mime and our other editorial partners as well, you can go to our new website, www.soleilspace.com, And you would see actually the trailers and teasers for each short film Saturday. So the next one coming up is on September 24th, next Saturday. And we will be having our first Guatemalan filmmaker, Marissa Torriello. She'll be showing her short film, as well as a Guyanese Dominican-American filmmaker, Gabriela Moses. So 2 Caribbean, Latin American filmmakers, really awesome films. Like those are also not ones to miss. So thanks everyone. Like and subscribe this channel. Follow us on Instagram at soleil.space, and we'll see you next week.